My name is Ashley, and I'm 28 years old. 6 months ago, I was living in my parents' basement, jobless and broken. Today, I'm signing the deed to my dream home while my family begs for forgiveness. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones holding you back the hardest. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at my childhood desk, scrolling through job applications on my laptop. The familiar creak of footsteps above told me my brother Marcus was awake. Within minutes, he'd be downstairs with his usual commentary about my life. "Still playing pretend office worker?" Marcus said, appearing in my doorway with his coffee mug. At 31, he'd been living in our parents' house for 7 years. The difference was that everyone treated his situation like temporary bad luck. Mine was treated like personal failure. I looked up from my screen. "Just job hunting, Marcus. Same as yesterday." He leaned against the doorframe, smirking. "You know, Ashley, maybe it's time to accept reality. Not everyone's cut out for the corporate world. Mom could probably get you a part-time job at her office." Something in his tone made my chest tighten. "Thanks, but I'm holding out for something better." "Better?" He laughed. "You've been holding out for 8 months. Face it, sis. This is our home now. Might as well get comfortable." Those words hit me like ice water. Asterisk. This is our home now. Asterisk. As if my temporary setback was permanent. As if I belonged in this basement forever. But Marcus didn't know what I'd just received in my email. While he was upstairs criticizing my life choices, I'd gotten a call back for a position I'd interviewed for 2 weeks earlier. Senior marketing coordinator at Davidson and Associates. The salary was double what I'd made at my previous job. I stared at my laptop screen, reading the email again. They wanted to discuss compensation and start dates. After months of rejection letters and ghost interviews, someone finally saw my potential. "Actually, Marcus," I said, closing my laptop, "I think things are about to change." He rolled his eyes. "Sure they are. Let me know when you're ready to join the real world." As he walked away, I made a decision that would transform everything. I wasn't just going to take this job. I was going to prove to my family that they'd underestimated me completely. But first, I needed to understand why they treated me this way. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible one. While Marcus partied through college and dropped out junior year, I graduated summa cum laude with my marketing degree. When he crashed, his car drunk driving, I drove him to court dates and AA meetings. When he couldn't make rent, I loaned him money I couldn't afford to lose. Yet somehow, I was the disappointment. The pattern became crystal clear that morning. My parents had spent so much energy enabling Marcus that they'd forgotten how to support me. My temporary struggle was treated like evidence of failure, while his permanent irresponsibility was met with understanding and assistance. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. That afternoon, I called Davidson and Associates back. Not only did I accept their offer, but I negotiated for a higher salary and earlier start date. They agreed to both requests. Then I started planning something that would change my family's perception of me forever. I wasn't just going to move out. I was going to buy a house. A real house. In the neighborhood where my parents had always dreamed of living but could never afford. I had 1 month to make this happen before my family realized what was coming. The hardest part wasn't securing the mortgage or finding the perfect property. It was watching my family continue to treat me like a failure while I secretly prepared to blow their minds. Every morning, Marcus would make his little comments. still pretending to be career woman? Every evening, my parents would suggest I lower my expectations and be more realistic about my prospects. I smiled through it all, knowing that in 4 weeks, everything would change. But I had no idea how dramatically their true colors would show when success finally came knocking. To understand why my family's reaction hurt so deeply, you need to know about the years that led up to this moment. I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. My parents, David and Linda, were hardworking middle-class people who did their best with what they had. Dad worked maintenance at the local school district. Mom was a receptionist at a dental office. Money was always tight, but we had enough. What we didn't have was emotional balance. Marcus was born 3 years before me, and from day one, he was the golden child. Not because he was exceptionally talented or well-behaved. Actually, it was the opposite. Marcus needed more attention, more intervention, more rescuing. Somehow, this translated into more love. When Marcus struggled in school, my parents hired tutors and met with teachers weekly. When I struggled with advanced calculus in high school, I was told to figure it out because I was the smart one. When Marcus got arrested for underage drinking at 17, my parents spent thousands on a lawyer and countless hours in court. When I wanted to apply to expensive colleges, I was told we couldn't afford it and needed to be practical. The message was clear. Marcus's problems deserved solutions. Mine deserved endurance. My sister Emma, 4 years younger than me, learned early to stay invisible. She'd perfected the art of being neither the troubled child nor the responsible one. Emma floated through life on autopilot, doing just enough to avoid criticism, but never enough to draw attention. Then there was my youngest brother, Jake, 8 years my junior. At 20, Jake was still treated like the baby of the family. Every mistake was met with, "He's still figuring things out," and "He's got time to mature." I loved my family deeply, but I'd spent 28 years being the one expected to have everything together while receiving the least support. When I lost my job last year, the company I'd worked for since college eliminated my entire department. It wasn't performance-related. It was purely economic. 15 people lost their jobs that day, including several with more experience than me. But when I moved back home, the narrative became, Ashley can't keep a job. Marcus, who'd been unemployed for 6 months at that point, suddenly became the family expert on career advice. "Maybe you should consider retail," he'd say. Steady, hours, predictable income. My parents nodded along as if this made sense. Meanwhile, Jake was encouraged to take his time, finding direction after dropping out of community college. Emma was supported in her decision to work part-time as a barista while exploring her artistic side. Only my unemployment was treated as a character flaw. The house dynamics were suffocating. Every morning, I'd wake up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters from high school and furniture that hadn't been updated since 2010. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every conversation in the kitchen above. Those conversations were often about me. "Do you think Ashley's being too picky about jobs?" Mom would ask Dad over coffee. "She always did think she was too good for regular work," he'd reply. This, coming from the man who'd been proud of my marketing degree just 2 years earlier. Emma would occasionally defend me, but quietly. "Maybe she's just being strategic," she'd whisper. Jake usually said nothing, focused on his phone or whatever video game consumed his attention that week. Marcus, though, always had opinions. "Ashley needs a reality check. She's been living in a fantasy world since college." Listening to these conversations from my basement bedroom was like slow poison. Each comment eroded a little more of my confidence and self-worth. But they also gave me insight into how my family really saw me. not as someone going through temporary hardship, but as someone whose success had always been an illusion. Have you ever felt like your own family was rooting against you? Drop a comment if you've experienced this kind of emotional neglect. Your story matters, and you're not alone in this struggle. The breaking point came 3 weeks into my new job, search strategy. I'd finally gotten serious about finding not just any job, but the right job. I was targeting positions that matched my education and experience level. This apparently made me unrealistic and entitled. That's when I decided to conduct an experiment that would reveal my family's true feelings about my success, and the results would shock me to my core. The experiment began innocently enough. I wanted to test whether my family's lack of support was about genuine concern or something darker. I started by mentioning small wins in my job search. Got a second interview with that marketing firm, I'd say casually over dinner. Marcus would shrug. Don't get your hopes up. You know how these things go. Mom would add, maybe you should apply to that retail position Emma mentioned. It's more reliable. Dad would nod in agreement. Sometimes you have to start from the bottom again. But when Jake mentioned considering going back to school, the response was entirely different. That's wonderful, honey. Mom beamed. You're so smart. You'll figure out exactly what you want to do. Take your time, Dad added. The right path will reveal itself. The double standard was glaring. 2 weeks after starting my new job, I decided to push the experiment further. I began acting slightly more confident. Not arrogant, just less apologetic about my situation. Actually, I think I'm going to land something good soon, I said one evening. Marcus laughed. There's the old Ashley ego. Remember what happened last time you got cocky? I'm not being cocky. I'm being optimistic. Same thing, he replied. Emma shot me a sympathetic look but said nothing. She'd mastered the art of silent support that never risked confrontation. The most telling moment came when I accidentally overheard a phone conversation between my mother and her sister, Aunt Carol. Ashley's still living in dreamland, Mom was saying. She thinks she's going to waltz back into some high-paying job like nothing happened. Well, maybe the humbling experience will be good for her, Aunt Carol replied. She always was a bit too sure of herself. Exactly. Maybe this will teach her to be more grateful for what she has. I stood frozen outside the kitchen listening. To my mother discuss my humbling experience, like it was necessary character development. That's when I realized something devastating. My family wasn't just unsupportive. They were actively hoping I'd fail. Not because they were cruel people, but because my success made them uncomfortable. When I was struggling, I was relatable. When I was succeeding, I was a reminder of their own limitations. This revelation changed everything about how I approached my secret job and house hunt. I started paying closer attention to family dynamics during my final weeks at home. What I discovered was a complex web of resentment, competition, and misplaced loyalty. Marcus resented me because my college success had always made his dropout look worse by comparison. My current struggle was the first time in years that he'd felt superior to me. My parents had invested so much energy in managing Marcus's problems that they'd become comfortable with crisis. My independence and competence had always made them feel less needed. Emma was caught between loyalty to me and fear of disrupting family peace. She'd learned that speaking up for anyone meant becoming a target yourself. Jake genuinely didn't understand the dynamics. At 20, he was still focused on his own world and hadn't yet learned to read between the lines of family conversations. The house hunt became my secret mission. Every day while my family was at work, I toured properties with my realtor, Sarah. She was a warm woman in her 50s who treated my home buying journey with the excitement it deserved. You should be proud of yourself, Sarah said as we walked. through a beautiful colonial on Elm Street. Buying your first home at 28, especially after a career setback, shows real resilience. Her words were like water in a desert. When was the last time someone in my family had acknowledged my resilience? The house on Elm Street was perfect. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, updated kitchen, and a large backyard. It was in the exact neighborhood where my parents had always wanted to live, but could never afford. "I want to make an offer," I told Sarah. "Are you sure? We can look at a few more properties." "No, this is it. This is home." But buying the house was only part of my plan. I needed to orchestrate the reveal perfectly. My family needed to understand not just that I'd succeeded, but how completely they'd misjudged me. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who should have believed in you all along? Let me know in the comments how you handled family members who doubted your potential. The closing was scheduled for a Friday. My family had no idea that in 72 hours, their basement-dwelling disappointment would become a homeowner. The anticipation was killing me, but the best part was yet to come. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. I dressed carefully, choosing a professional blazer and slacks that made me look successful, without being obvious about it. "Job interview?" Mom asked as I poured coffee in the kitchen. "Something like that," I replied. Marcus wandered in, still in pajamas at 10 a.m. Another wild goose chase? We'll see. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a conference room at the title company, signing papers that made me a homeowner. Sarah handed me the keys with a huge smile. "Congratulations, Ashley. You did it." I held those keys in my palm, feeling their weight. They represented everything my family thought I couldn't achieve. The drive back to Maple Street felt surreal. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage for what came next. Inside, the whole family was gathered in the living room. Friday afternoon had become an unofficial family hangout time, mostly because Marcus and Jake had no other plans. "How'd the thing go?" Dad asked absently, focused on the television. "Really well, actually." I sat down on the couch, keys hidden in my closed fist. "I have some news to share." Marcus looked up from his phone. "Let me guess. They want to interview you again next week." "Not exactly." Mom muted the TV. "What kind of news?" I took a deep breath. "First, I should mention that I've been working for 3 weeks now." The room went silent. "Working where?" Emma asked. "Davidson and Associates, Senior Marketing Coordinator. I start each day at 8 a.m. while you're all still asleep." Marcus's face shifted through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like anger. "You've been lying to us for 3 weeks?" "Not lying, just not sharing every detail of my life." "But why would you hide having a job?" Mom asked. "Because I wanted to see how you'd react to my success versus my struggle." The experiment was very revealing. Dad leaned forward. "What kind of experiment?" I opened my palm, revealing the house keys. "The kind that ends with me buying a house in Willowbrook Estates." You could have heard a pin drop. "Willowbrook?" Mom whispered. "That's where we always wanted to live." "I know. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, updated everything." I close. "Well, I closed today." Marcus stood up abruptly. "This is insane. You can't afford a house in Willowbrook. You've been unemployed for 8 months. Actually, I can afford it. My new salary is $85,000 a year plus bonuses." The number hung in the air like smoke. "85,000? Dad repeated. "More than any of us make," I said quietly. Emma broke the tension. "Ashley, this is amazing. I'm so proud of you." But Emma's joy was drowned out by Marcus's reaction. Proud of her for what? For lying to her family? For making us all look like idiots? I didn't make you look like anything, Marcus. I just succeeded despite your constant discouragement. Discouragement? His voice rose. We were being realistic. You were being unsupportive. There's a difference. Mom looked confused and hurt. Honey, we always supported you. Really? When I mentioned getting interviews, you told me to apply for retail jobs. When I expressed optimism, I was told not to get my hopes up. When Marcus talks about his future, he gets encouragement. When I talk about mine, I get lectures about being realistic. The truth was finally out in the open. Jake, who'd been quiet this whole time, spoke up. She's right. We do treat Ashley differently. That's not true, Dad protested, but his tone suggested he was beginning to understand. Marcus wasn't done. So what? You're just going to abandon your family? Move to your fancy house and forget about us? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. This is ridiculous, Marcus said. You're being dramatic. Am I? When's the last time anyone in this room celebrated my achievements instead of minimizing them? Silence. Emma stood up and hugged me. I celebrate them. I always have. Just not loudly enough. I know you do, Em. That means everything to me. If you've ever had to choose between family peace and self-respect, drop a like on this video. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important changes. The argument continued for 2 more hours, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for my success. And I wasn't going to start now. The immediate aftermath was brutal. Marcus didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My parents oscillated between pride and confusion, unsure how to process their basement-dwelling daughter becoming the family's highest earner overnight. Moving day was telling. Emma showed up with coffee and packing supplies. Jake came with his pickup truck and genuine enthusiasm about my new place. My parents arrived with cautious smiles and obvious discomfort. Marcus was nowhere to be found. He'll come around, Mom said as we packed my books. But her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The house on Elm Street was everything I'd dreamed of. Hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. The kitchen island was perfect for morning coffee and evening meal prep. My home office overlooked the backyard where I planned to plant a garden come spring. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. But success came with unexpected challenges. My family didn't know how to relate to me anymore. Sunday. Dinners became awkward affairs where everyone walked on eggshells, afraid to mention money, jobs, or future plans. Marcus finally visited 6 weeks after I moved. He stood in my living room, hands shoved in his pockets, looking around like he was surveying a crime scene. Nice place, he said flatly. Thanks. Want the tour? He shrugged, following me through rooms that probably cost more than his annual income. In the master bedroom, he stopped at the window overlooking the neighborhood. Do you feel better now? He asked. Better than what? Than the rest of us. Isn't that what this was about? I sat on my bed, studying my older brother's face. 3 decades of life, and he still looked like the hurt little boy who'd never learned to celebrate other people's wins. Marcus, this was never about being better than anyone. This was about being believed in. We believed in you. No, you didn't. You believed I would eventually accept less than I deserved. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long time. Maybe, he said finally. Maybe you're right. That conversation was the beginning of something new between us. Not friendship exactly, but understanding. The real transformation came 6 months later. I'd settled into my new life completely. Work was challenging and rewarding. My house had become a home filled with furniture I'd chosen and artwork that reflected my personality. I'd started dating someone wonderful, a kind man named David who treated my success as something to celebrate rather than tolerate. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my own judgment about people and situations. That's when Marcus called with news that changed everything. "I got into a program," he said over the phone. "Addiction counseling certification. It's a 2-year commitment." "Marcus, that's amazing." "Yeah. Well, watching you turn your life around made me realize I should probably do the same with mine." The pride in his voice was something I'd never heard before. 6 months later, our family dynamics had shifted completely. Marcus was thriving in his program and had moved into his own apartment. He'd started dating someone who encouraged his growth instead of enabling his stagnation. Jake had decided to go back to school, inspired partly by my career success and partly by Marcus's personal transformation. Emma had started speaking up more, finding her voice in family discussions and even in her relationship with her longtime boyfriend. My parents had gradually learned to celebrate my achievements without qualification. They'd started asking for my advice on financial decisions and career choices, recognizing that I'd developed expertise they could benefit from. Most importantly, they'd apologized. "We didn't realize how much we were holding you back," Dad said, during a family dinner at my house. "We thought we were protecting you, but we were really protecting ourselves." "Protecting yourselves from what?" "From admitting that maybe we could have done more with our own lives," Mom added quietly. Have you ever had a family member apologize for years of misplaced doubt? Share in the comments how forgiveness played a role in your own family healing journey. The house that had started as proof of my success had become something better. Gathering place for a family learning to support each other properly. Every Sunday, they come for dinner. We cook together, laugh together, and celebrate each other's wins without competition or resentment. It took me 28 years to learn that sometimes you have to prove your worth to yourself before others will recognize it. But once you do, everything changes. 1 year later, I'm writing this from my home office, looking out at the garden I planted last spring. The tomatoes are coming in beautifully, and the flowers I chose are attracting butterflies every morning. This morning, I got a text from Marcus. "Graduated top of my class. Thank you for showing me what's possible." 6 words that represent a complete transformation in our relationship. The journey from basement dweller to homeowner taught me lessons I never expected to learn. Success isn't just about achieving your goals. It's about learning who truly supports your growth and who feels threatened by it. My family's initial reaction wasn't about cruelty. It was about fear. Fear that if I succeeded beyond their expectations, it would highlight their own unrealized potential. Fear that if I stopped needing their help, they'd lose their purpose in my life. Understanding this helped me forgive them while still maintaining the boundaries I'd established. The most profound change has been in how I view myself. For years, I'd internalized my family's doubt as truth. I'd started to believe that maybe I was being unrealistic. Maybe I should lower my expectations. Maybe I wasn't as capable as I thought. Proving them wrong proved something to myself. I am exactly as capable as I always believed I was. But this story isn't really about houses or jobs or family drama. It's about the courage to bet on yourself when no one else will. How many dreams have you abandoned because the people closest to you couldn't envision your success? How many times have you made yourself smaller to make others comfortable? If you're watching this and recognizing patterns in your own family, I want you to know something important. Their inability to see your potential is not evidence that it doesn't exist. Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are actually the people who knew you longest ago. They're seeing outdated versions of who you are instead of recognizing who you've become. My relationship with my family is stronger now than it's ever been. But it required me to establish clear boundaries about how I would and wouldn't accept being treated. Emma told me recently that watching me stand up for myself gave her permission to do the same in her own relationships. She started her own photography business and is thriving creatively for the first time in years. Jake is excelling in his engineering program and has developed confidence I never saw in him before. He credits our family's transformation with helping him believe in his own capabilities. My parents have started taking risks they'd avoided for years. Dad is considering starting his own handyman business instead of working for the school district. Mom is exploring real estate licensing. Success, it turns out, is contagious when it's celebrated instead of feared. To anyone watching this who feels stuck in patterns of family doubt or discouragement, here's what I learned. You don't owe anyone access to your dreams just because they're family. You don't have to make yourself smaller to make them comfortable. You don't have to prove your worth to people who should already know it. But you do have to be willing to succeed without their permission. The hardest part of my journey wasn't buying the house or starting the new job. It was learning to celebrate my own achievements when the people I expected to celebrate with me couldn't. Now I have a family that cheers for my wins because they've learned that my success doesn't diminish theirs, it inspires theirs. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about family, boundaries, and personal transformation. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. But more importantly, share your own story in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and personal growth? How did you navigate relationships that felt threatened by your success? Your experiences matter. Your journey matters. And your success, when it comes, will matter too. The basement bedroom where this story began is now my guest room when family visits. Sometimes I sit in there and remember the person I was a year ago. Scared, doubted, and convinced that maybe everyone else was right about my limitations. That person was wrong about herself. And if you're in a similar place right now, you might be wrong about yourself too. The only way to find out is to bet on yourself and see what happens. Trust me, you might just surprise everyone, including yourself. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps you write yours.